Welcome to Ladies in Law, where real-world advice meets professional wisdom and empowerment in realms of law and business. Your hosts, Lisa Goucher, Dawn Smith, and Kellye Raymond, bring you innovative strategies, practical guidance, and inspirational stories. Join us as we inspire and support women to thrive in traditionally male-dominated fields. We're here to promote inclusivity and provide practical advice for success. Hi, Lisa here with Kellye and Dawn today, and we are talking about changing your perspective. And it can be related to your employment, whether you're wanting to move within a company, within a firm, or even just transitioning from the employee standpoint to an entrepreneur. So for me personally, I was a very, very good employee. I loved being an employee. I loved collecting that check, knowing what my bonus was, knowing that I could work overtime. But then the other side of me started having the inkling related to, okay, I think I can do something more. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. When you get to the point where you think you can do something more, what are some really good suggestions to get you moving in that direction? The first one I'm going to throw out there is take advantage of every opportunity that presents itself for you to better yourself. There's a lot of free courses out there, whether they're online. A lot of firms offer opportunities for volunteering. When you put yourself out there like that, it puts you in a new environment, opportunity for networking, and it can lay the foundation for pushing you in the direction that you want to go. Like if you're feeling stagnant, that is when it's most important to push yourself outside your comfort zone.
I was just going to say, don't say no, right? Don't say yes. Say yes. Yeah. I mean, so one thing that I always think about, and I tell a lot of people, when I was a brand new lawyer, I was sworn in at the beginning of November. I was sworn in, and my bosses called me in to their office and said, hey, do you want to fly to New York next week and take the deposition of the editor-in-chief of Sports Illustrated? And I was like, yes.
You're like, yes.
I was like, do you think I can do it? And they said, yes, we think you can do it. And I said, okay, yes, I'll do it. And they both looked at me like, wow, she said yes. And that was kind of, I think, the first just going through that experience and doing something completely terrifying and just coming out on the back end of it and not dying, right? I didn't die. It just really gave me a lot of confidence that, you just have to, like Lisa said, like Kellye said, just kind of grab onto that opportunity. Just try something new, try something different. What do you think?
Yeah, I think sometimes you have to jump into the deep end. And as long as you've prepared, I think you can do that. It's still scary, but there's a difference between not feeling ready. Like, you're never going to feel ready to start your own business. You're never going to feel ready, but you can be prepared to do so. And so I think just pushing yourself before you think that you're ready to, we've talked about this a ton. I never had any desire to open my own shop. And I was a good employee, right? I worked really hard, and I thought that I took that business just as seriously as I took my own. That's who I am, right? But I think that it is a very mindful shift when you do make the leap to starting your own company, that you're not the employee anymore. You are the boss. And even if it's before you actually have employees that report to you, when I started my company, it was just me, myself, and I. But I had to be very intentional about shifting my mindset to the fact that I was not somebody's employee anymore. I was a boss. I had to think about, okay, when is the paycheck coming in, right? You lose that sense of security. And so you've got to be thinking about, how am I going to generate business? What am I going to do? I think that's probably the best advice I think that anybody could give, is go to everything. Say yes to everything. You never know who you're going to meet, what somebody that you meet might teach you, what they might have to offer you. You just don't know unless you go.
Yeah.
I rhymed.
Yeah. I was thinking with both of you guys, both of you had somebody else that saw something in you, saw that spark within you that made both of you say, maybe I can do this, right? Because both of you have just said that you were good employees, confident in what you were doing, pretty happy in what you were doing, but each one of you had somebody that you were close to that said, hey, I think you can do this.
Enthusiasm. I think it was my enthusiasm, just like whatever.
Telling you that you could do it?
You can do it. Whether you can or not. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can. Yeah, they said I can. So my husband and my best friend, like, just do it. I'm like, all right, I'm going to just do it.
So I feel I did not have the enthusiasm. I was a little bit more begrudging, which sounds terrible to say because I'm so fortunate to be busy and really doing well in my business. But I did not want to start my own company. And in fact, I went and interviewed for another consulting firm, and my husband and Lisa Blue, my mentor, and I must have done something really good in a past life because she's very good to me. And they both just kept saying, why would you go work for somebody else? Just work for yourself and you're going to be so busy. And I was just like, yeah, well, that's easy for you to say. Like, you're not the one having to do it.
So so you kind of, I think, getting to know you more and more, which is really interesting. I thought I knew you guys really well, but I've definitely got to know you a lot better through this experience. So I think you think a lot about things first.
Oh, I think I overthink a lot about things first, and I sort of tend to overanalyze and think about all the things that could go wrong and all the reasons why it wouldn't be good to do. But at the end of the day, you jump off the cliff and you've got to figure it out.
So that's the whole thing. Like, what kind of advice would you give to somebody where they think they're an overthinker and they're worried about making a mistake? They just can't take that leap.
Yeah. How'd you overcome that?
I think just surrounding Lisa Blue, she's way smarter than me, right? Like, if she was telling me like, oh, you're going to be good at this and you can do it, I'm like, okay, I don't know if I believe you, and then, having my then boyfriend, now husband, just really believed in me. Like, I would not have started my own business if not for the two of them. And so I think it's always helpful when you have somebody telling you that they believe in you kind of before you believe in yourself. And then you kind of start to chip away at it and you're like, okay, look, we started an LLC. Here it is. And okay, I'm forcing myself. We've talked about this before, but I really had to force myself to go to every networking function I could get my hands on. And it was wildly uncomfortable. And I'd go and get my free little glass of wine, and that always helped take the edge off. But you really have to step outside of your comfort zone, I think, in order to grow and to push yourself and to ultimately do something that you're kind of meant to be doing. But I never kind of thought that on the front end.
So we just had Stephanie Boston on, and she was such an inspiration. I think one thing that she said that really resonated with me was the fact that she didn't feel like her heart was there where she worked. It just didn't pull her like she wanted to be pulled. When you care about what you're doing, when you're so passionate about what you're doing and you're not aligned with the company that you work for, I think that's probably one of the best places to just kind of pull from to get that courage to go out on your own.
I think that's so true because I didn't have and I had no desire to go out on my own. I would have stayed working at that firm forever, I think, even though it wasn't the healthiest. But I got to the point where I would come home crying every day. And I'm not a super emotional person. And I would come home crying every day just because it just became a little bit too toxic. And it was funny. I'll never forget my, again, boyfriend at the time, now husband. We had just moved in together, and Chris. His name is Chris. Shout out to Chris Bronner. But we had just moved in together when about a month later, I'm like, okay, we're going to do it. I'm going to make this decision. And I said, but don't you think it's going to be stressful? We've just moved in together. What if I don't make any money? I'm thinking to myself, at least I won't be homeless. He's not going to evict me. And he said something that I'd never really fully appreciated. And he said, don't you think it's been stressful, the fact that you've come home crying almost every day for a year? That's kind of stressful too. He's like, so this is going to be a new kind of stress. And he was so right. And
it was a healthy stress.
It was, yes.
A healthy stress, which they say that's good for you. When you're
makes
pushing
you feel alive.
Yes, push you outside your comfort zone. So, one of the biggest challenges I faced, because my company, it's a Cinderella story. I was working as a paralegal. My soon-to-be partner, after I joined, she just was like, if you run the office, you drum up business, you double it, then I'll give you half of it. So I went from total employee mindset into managing at first 2 people, and then we got up to 75 employees. And I would say when you're in a firm, or if you're starting out on your own and you grow, one of the biggest issues is, in my opinion, is your mindset. Because you are not an employee any longer. They are not your peers. You know, you have to work like a leader, and you don't have to, you can't, and Dawn, I'm sure you can identify with this, with starting in a firm and then moving over, is, you know, being in the trenches with the coworkers when you're now in management. You don't need to hear all the ins and outs and everything of their day to day and their complaining, unless it's something related to work. So for me, it was like trying to remove myself as basically the friend, the coworker friend, and to put myself in a management level. And that took some time. It was one of those things where I was still just down there with them, side by side. And then I got to the point where I was like, I don't need to hear everything about your mother, brother, son, and child. And then there was a point a couple years in where I had an assistant, and I just said, okay, Heather Serta, she was my assistant, a wonderful assistant. And I just said, all right, tell me everything that's going on in the office. And I kid you not, like 5 minutes in, I was like, all right, never mind. Like, never mind. I don't need to know that.
Right.
That does not, so if it doesn't affect their work, I don't need to know what's going on,
I think
gossip-wise.
I think that's great advice, because I think as the boss, I mean, and you want to have a good, healthy communication with your employees. I think it's important that you like the people that you're around, but I think that you have to be very mindful you're not their friend. And so really, like, staying in that business and transitioning from colleague to management and being an owner, you really had to kind of put up a little bit of a wall. And I think that's super smart to do. Dawn, you've got several lawyers and staff and paralegals under you. How do you kind of balance, like, I'm the boss, like, I want this to be a good place to work, but I'm also your boss, I'm not your friend?
So I've always been too far out on the other side. Like, I've always been fearful about being vulnerable with the people around me and asking them. I'm a really private person, which that's hilarious that we're doing a podcast.
Yeah, that is.
Tell us everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very private person, and I don't just go in and just start asking you private things about your life. It doesn't mean that I'm not interested. It doesn't mean that I don't care, but a lot of times I just don't think that it's my business. And I think some people take that as me being cold or standoffish. I mean, there's got to be a line, right, to where you can build a relationship with your employees so that they know that you care about them and that you're creating this business so that they can be successful as well. I mean, how do you walk on that line so that you are fulfilling both roles, building those relationships, building that trust, and also having those boundaries?
I think listen, I've got, I don't have nearly as many employees as you guys have or have had, but I've got the best assistant, and my business would truly not function without her. And sometimes I find myself, like, I'll shoot off an email and then I'll think, oh gosh, I forgot to say, like, hi, good morning, how are you, right? And
that's totally my problem too.
Right,
I'm
and
really
so
bad
I think
at that.
there's a difference. I think it's a little bit different because I've got such a small business. But I've kind of run into this issue with, hiring interns. And it's, and especially when you're traveling with people, right? When you're getting on a flight to go do a mock trial, you kind of learn a little bit about people in a different way than if you're just seeing them in an office. But
so uncomfortable.
It can be. Yes, it can be. But I'm similar. Like, I'm happy to make small talk, but I don't want to hear, like, all of the details. I don't want to hear about all the drama. It was one of my favorite things about starting my company, is no longer having to go into an office and deal with all the different office personalities, because I found it to be, like, kind of a waste of time, right? And a waste of my day. And people kind of get bogged down in the minutia. But sometimes I think you have to kind of remind yourself, like, these are people that work really hard for you, and it's important to say good morning and ask them how they're doing.
And it doesn't mean we're shitty.
Right.
It just means
we're not
that
shitty. We're not shitty.
just because I mean, how many times have I started to write a Slack and then had to go back and put good morning?
Yeah,
It's just
right.
not part
Well,
of
I
me.
think when we're communicating with each other, like, that's fine. Just get to the point, knock it out, make it happen. But we talked about this, networking, cultivating clients, and I don't know if it was you, Dawn, or Kellye, like, you actually put notes in your phone.
I do.
Related to
I don't.
their children.
I do,
And
yeah.
I
That's
do that
so
too.
smart.
And I feel like that's what needs to be done with the people that you surround yourself in your office that you're working with. You just need to know the names of their children or what they're doing, or if they're, at least greet them.
Yeah,
I
I think
it's the start of school. How's
Right.
it going?
Like a surface level. Oh, your kid just graduated from high school. Like, what are they doing now? How's college going? Kind of surface level. Like, we don't need to get too in the weeds.
I'm terrible at
Salutations are always a good place to start, right? If you're not that good
terrible.
That shocks me, Dawn, because the way that you reach out to me on the regular, and you have for years, like, you're always very warm.
She's very thoughtful, but I think when
Reaching
she's
out.
you're the
work
boss,
mode.
like your name is on
Yeah,
the door, right?
yeah.
When you're in work mode, especially when you've got deadlines and trials coming up, and it can be like a high stress environment. Sometimes you kind of forget to, hey, how's it going? Like, before we launch into the what's the shit we got to get done.
I mean, I'm working on that, because I do feel like I am a different person as a boss, as a leader, than I am with colleagues and friends. And I think you have to cross over a little bit. You have to have that balance between getting shit done and having that kind of sense of urgency, but then also really
Being a
caring
human.
caring about the people around you.
Right.
I'm always like kind of head down. Like I said, my husband is great at this. My husband would talk to people. He's very
But don't you think it's almost better to maybe err? I mean, not to be like mean, and like we've all had mean bosses before. Like, you don't want to be like mean and cold, but I do think it might be better to err on the side of not being too chummy with your employees, because I think when you get too close with your employees, the lines blur, and it's sometimes, depending on the person, it's harder to get good work product out of them, or the lines get a little too blurred.
Do you have any examples of that? Do you have any good dish, either one of you, that something that you've seen at your old firm or when you were working, just to where there was some sort of a crossover?
Okay, well, I'll just tell you, in my last firm, 3 different sets of people married.
Oh,
They're-
yes, gosh.
I was just, and we weren't even that big a firm.
Talk about blurring the lines.
Well, and when it's great, it's good.
yeah.
But when it starts to going downhill,
You're like,
and
we
one
can
of-
tell Jim and Jane had a bad
Yeah,
night.
yeah. Well, like Joe isn't doing great. Well, that's not a good example, because he is actually one of them. I was trying to give a name. That, like, Sam.
John.
When Sam was slacking off, then I didn't want to tell Betty, get your husband in line.
Yeah, right.
They both work there in different departments. Yes.
I mean,
It was challenging.
I've also just been, I don't know why, but I feel like I've been the victim of like people oversharing sometimes in like prior employment situations. And, as an employee, you're just like, okay, I didn't really want to hear about that or know about that. As a boss, like, you don't have time for that crap. You just don't.
by the
right?
way, don't air your dirty laundry from a prior employment.
PSA,
I
yeah.
mean, no boss wants to know that. And maybe they'll ask, but don't lie, but don't tell the whole truth.
Well, I've always found, when you were talking about transitioning, whether it be laterally in your company or moving out of your company, starting your own, I don't think it ever benefits anybody to badmouth the place that you're leaving. You're leaving for a reason. People aren't stupid. And somebody, in fact, I think it was Lisa Blue told me this when I was leaving, because it was devastating and it was really, really hard and sad. And it was my first job out of law school. And she was just like, Kellye, this is like a divorce. It's just like any sort of relationship ending. But I think if you treat it as respectfully as you can, leaving and going out on your own, I don't think that you get anywhere by stepping on the people that have helped you to get, and maybe they kind of molded you and pushed you in a way that was hard to deal with at the time, but you wouldn't be where you are without those experiences. I've never found that kind of shit talking and, talking negatively about people that you've worked with or for in the past. It's just not, it doesn't really help you.
It's a huge red flag. Let me just say, it's a huge red flag. When Curtis and I are talking to any prospective employer and they start just talking to any prospective employee, if they start dumping on their prior employer, we're like, oh,
you're like, oh yeah,
we're out.
Well,
We're
and
out.
starting your own company, especially when you start thinking that you're doing that, you need to be building and bonding and networking. Not that you're going to be taking from the company that you're in, but you never want to burn those bridges. Like you never know where people are going to end up, and your path is going to cross, and you're going to need them. So if you're thinking like, I would like to do something different, then the thing that you need to change right now, if you haven't already, is make sure that you are opening your eyes to network and searching and building relationships, even if you're leaving. Even if you're going out the door, because I promise your paths with most people will cross again if you are staying in the same industry.
Oh, 100%. The legal industry is
Small.
It's small. It's a small world, especially if you're just doing plaintiff's work. It's even smaller. And I just don't think, but whatever industry that you're in, I don't think that you get ahead by stepping on people or by talking badly about people. And when you're talking about people in a negative light, or if you're thinking about them in a negative light, like that's taking up space, and it's not allowing you to kind of push yourself and move forward in a positive way. You're kind of stuck in the negative, and it's not a good spot to be in.
No. And like I said, nobody's forcing you to stay at a place that you don't love. I know we have to find work and we have to find a job, and it's a privilege to find a place that you love, that you can thrive at, but you just don't have to stay. It's not a prison.
Exactly. So if it's not working, move on. If you're looking to transition, there's just a handful of things that you need to remember. Number one, go to everything. Do everything. Take advantage of every opportunity that the company is presenting to you, and be proactive on personal growth. And then number two, don't be talking smack. Don't be talking smack. And number three, mentally prepare yourself to move into that role of being an entrepreneur, being a boss, taking charge, and be open to other people's criticisms. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
I think that really summarized it nicely, I think.
All right. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Ladies in Law. We hope you're walking away inspired and ready to shake things up in law and business. Don't forget to hit subscribe and let us know what you think. Spread the word and share this podcast with your network. Follow us on socials for all the behind-the-scenes fun and sneak peeks of upcoming episodes. Until next time, keep rocking it, keep breaking the mold, and as always, keep aspiring to inspire.